Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Thank you for clicking on my video. This is going to be an interesting video because I'm going to talk about the poem that George Orwell's first wife wrote that many people think inspired George Orwell's novel 1984. So the poem that she wrote was called End of the Century 1984, and then 4 years after her death, George Orwell brought out the novel 1984. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the poem, and then I'm going to read out the poem aloud to you, and then talk about the themes that people think are in both the poem and George Orwell's novel. So the poem was written by a woman called Eileen O'Shaughnessy in 1934. A year later, she met George Orwell, and they actually married in 1936, and then she died in 1945. 4 years after her death, George Orwell published the book 1984. So I'm going to read out the poem to you now. The poem is called End of the Century 1984, and it's in 3 parts: Death, Birth and the Phoenix. Death. Synthetic winds have blown away material dust, but this one room rebukes the constant violet ray, and dustless sheds a dusty room. Wretched on the outmoded past lie North and Hillard, Virgil, Horace. Shakespeare's bones are quiet at last, dead as Yeats and William Morris. Have not the inmates earned their rest? 100 circles traversed they, complaining of the classic quest, and each inevitable day illogically trying to place a ball within an empty space. Birth. Every loss is now a gain, for every chance must follow reason. A crystal palace meets the rain that falls at its appointed season. No book disturbs the lucid line, for some bronze scholars tune their thought to telepathic station 9, from which they know just what they ought. The useful sciences, the arts, of telesalesmanship and Spanish, as registered in Western parts. Mental cremation that shall banish relics, philosophies and colds. Mania-minded 10-year-olds. The Phoenix. Worlds have died that they may live, may plume again their fairest feathers, and in their clearest songs may give welcome all to spontaneous weathers. Bacon's college is called Einstein. Huxley's shares Platonic food. Violet rays are only sunshine, christened in the modern mood. In this house, if in no other, past and future may agree, each herself but each the other, in a curious harmony, finding both a proper place in the silken gown's embrace. So that is the poem there. I'm going to go through the points that people say is why the poem is very similar to 1984, and just remember she did write this a year before she even met George Orwell. So the reason the poem is called 1984 is because she was writing it for the 50th anniversary of the school that she went to. So she was just adding on another 50 years, like what would be people be talking about the school in another 50 years. And so that's why she called it 1984. And so he obviously took from that title to call his 1984, talking about in the future what his vision would be, what he thinks would be happening. So it has similarities within that. It also has themes of mind control, and there is mind control in 1984, and the eradication of personal freedom by a police state. And I think there's probably a lot more that you can go into. I've only found this out about this poem and the links to George Orwell's 1984. So that's why I'm making a video about it. But I think if you go into it, there is more that she talks about. Like she's talking about Virgil, Horace, Shakespeare, Yeats and William Morris, and she's saying, have the inmates not earned their rest? What's she talking about there? Are we trying to rewrite history? Are we trying to rewrite the things that they've written, which happens in 1984 with the Ministry of Truth when they actually rewrite history? So she's saying we're going to get rid of all these people and start a new world, and they won't fit into our new world. Is that what she's talking about within that? Also, I find it interesting, every loss is now a gain. Reminded me of 1984 when it's war is peace. That slogan within it, every loss is now a gain. That kind of way of thinking. And then to telepathic station 9. I feel like there's so much more in this. I'm gonna do, I think, a long video on my Patreon really going into it, but I just thought it was an interesting thing to make a video about. I also hadn't seen a reading of the poem on YouTube, so I just wanted to put a reading out there. So let me know down below in the comments if there's anything from this poem that you think, oh, I think when she's talking about this, that can be said in 1984, that he took inspiration from that. And people think that she was a great inspiration in his writing of 1984, not just because of this poem, that she also added ideas into it, but we will never know. We will never know the real influence that she had within his work. We don't know, but I think it is very interesting that she writes this poem end of the century 1984, and then he brings out a novel 1984, and both are about the future, and both have in it things to do that are in each one. Like, I'll say it again, like mind control and the eradication of personal freedom by the police state, but I would also say the rewriting of history when she's talking about Yeats and William Morris, and also the sloganism of every loss is now a gain. You know, war is peace, strength is ignorance. Those things that are in 1984, I find those really interesting as well. And also how at the beginning it says, illogically trying to place a ball within an empty space. Talking about people trying, this is just my interpretation of it, but how the world is very chaotic and people want it to be right or wrong, you're good or bad, that's it. And so they're trying to put something, make it fit in society that it doesn't fit. And 1984 is all about, this is right, this is wrong, this is what you should think, and if you don't think that, it's a crime. There's no personal freedom of speech or autonomy. And so I just find it interesting that she also talks about this. So let me know what you think about this. I'm doing a video every other day on my channel in October, and on my Patreon I'm doing a video every single day. I think on my Patreon I'm really gonna kind of take the poem apart if my patrons are interested in that. So I'm going to end it here, and I will see you soon for another video.